Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Kathy from the Kindergarten Kiosk Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect those of others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey EduMagicians, it's Sam, and before we start into this episode, I want to share with you about an amazing resource. It's called the Educator Candidate Member Portal. AAEE provides you with resources such as virtual job fairs, a job board, interview tips and prep, resume building, webinars. You can even get a copy of the Job Search Handbook digitally. So head on over to aaee.org and create your free Educator Candidate Member account today. Friends, one more thing before we get started. This episode is brought to you by my new course, Digital Portfolios from Scratch to Interview Ready. Head on over to sfessich.com/courses for more information about this self-paced, hands-on virtual workshop. Hello, friends, and welcome back. I have another crossover episode for you all today. And today I have with me Lindsay Simpson. We're going to be walking through 10 tips for emerging teachers. So if you are a new teacher, if you are a May graduate or a December grad, if you are starting your teaching career, turn up the volume, get your notes ready, because we're about to drop some great gems for you today. Lindsay, so great to have you on this crossover episode. Would you mind sharing with my listeners a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your show too, so they can subscribe and all those good things?
Absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for having me on. I'm so excited to do this crossover episode. As you mentioned, my name is Lindsay Simpson, and I am the host of the Behind the Chalk podcast, a podcast sharing inserts, research, and experiences from educators across the profession. So I really enjoy making the connections like you and I have been able to connect, just to share out and get these messages to as many educators as possible, whether you're at the beginning of your career or if you're a veteran teacher. So I think these tips really that we're going to share today are going to be beneficial for everybody. But aside from podcasting, I am also a STEAM and instructional technology specialist serving pre-K through 12 in a small rural district. So I get to have a lot of fun. I get to talk to a lot of educators, and I'm super excited to be here with you today.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and I'm so excited to be here. After my students had a assignment, which was listen to a podcast and give some takeaways, Behind the Chalk, Lindsay, was by far one of the top most listened to shows with different episodes that they had reflected upon. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get Lindsay on my show. We got to collaborate. So I'm so excited to be here and have this collaboration finally going. So my name is Dr. Sam, and I teach future teachers at Grove City College all about ed tech and special education. And I love what I do. I'm also the author of EduMagic, a guide for pre-service teachers. And today we're going to be sharing tips for new teachers that come from my, the 5 that I'm going to share come from my book, EduMagic Shine On, a guide for new teachers. So I'm excited to share some of these takeaways and strategies to help our new teachers in the crowd.
Wonderful. I can't wait to get started sharing these wonderful tips.
So my first tip is relationships first and foremost, all day, every day. You know, whether it's building relationships with your colleagues in your building. So if you're a new teacher, you're building those relationships with your new colleagues, with your grade level colleagues, or maybe with administration. Also building relationships if we're a student teacher, if we're listening to, and we're a student teaching next semester, building relationships with your mentor or your cooperating teacher. And I know that can be a little nerve-wracking, like you're sending that first email or you're making that first phone call. It's like, what do I even say? Be truthful, be honest to you, and the conversation will flow For those of you making connections with your cooperating teacher, introduce yourself, share how you're excited to be working with that teacher this semester, maybe even share out your college, your certification area, and then, set up a time to maybe have a virtual or in-person socially distanced coffee with your cooperating teacher. But first and foremost, it's so important to get to know our students, whether you are in a field placement for a couple days a week, a student teaching placement, which is usually a lot of weeks, or you're a new teacher beginning your journey into education as a new educator. It's so important to get to know your students beyond that interest survey. Get to know them as each unique individuals in your classroom. And there's a couple of other people you can get to know too, like other professionals in the building, especially if you have any special ed teachers in the crowd, getting to know your paraprofessionals, your classroom assistant, other professionals like speech therapists, hearing therapists, all the therapists. Get to know them along with counseling services, administrative assistants, and custodians. Everyone, get to know everybody, because you never know when you're going to need help, because as a new teacher, you're not expected to be perfect. You're going to have questions. So have an open mind and get to know others.
That is an amazing tip. And actually, I'm going to follow up with my tip that kind of piggybacks perfectly on that one. And it's finding the resources in your district and using them. So as you are introducing yourself to all of those really important people in the building, whether it's your admin, cooperating teachers, your paraprofessionals, what are the other resources in your building that are going to help you be successful as an educator? Do you have instructional coaches in your district? Librarians are magical people. And I find that they're so knowledgeable in so many different ways, and be able to just connect you with resources, being able to help you with digital tools at times. And often they just know all of the people in the building. So I always introduce myself to the librarian. And then the secretarial and office staff and maintenance staff should be your best friends. So make sure you introduce yourself to them, and, on weekends, leave a thank you note. You can do things that don't cost you any money, but people appreciate so much. And then when you lock yourself out of the room, they're going to be willing to come get you in. I may have done that once or twice. But in all seriousness, these are people who are really great resources. And as you teach your lessons and you're trying to make connections to the real world, these are people who you can pull in and work with your kids and really elevate your lessons to another level. And so those instructional coaches, librarians, secretarial, office staff, maintenance staff, go find them, go befriend them, and bake them cookies once in a while, and your life is set.
Yes, I love that. And that piggybacks so great off of building those relationships. Use the resources that are available to you in your district. That's awesome. So I have tip number 3, and this is a good one whenever we're thinking about, starting a new school year, we're starting fresh. What are our expectations for ourselves as teachers, for ourselves as leaders? Because yes, new teachers, you can be a leader in your district as a first-year teacher. You can be a leader, so step into that. How are you going to be a leader for your students? How are you going to be a leader in your school and in your district? Also setting those expectations for your students. So thinking about and brainstorming, what are your expectations for each of the students in your classroom, and writing those down. It's also a great time to think about your expectations as a learner. And this one's going to blend beautifully into one of yours, Lindsay. Being a lifelong learner is absolutely critical. So how are you going to continue that learning? Because we know, our EduMagic friends, that learning doesn't stop when you cross the stage of graduation. It is just beginning. Your journey is just beginning as a new teacher. So it's so important to keep that learning going. And I'm going to kick it on over to you, Lindsay, for the next one.
Yes, and that is a perfect segue, because my next tip is to be a lifelong learner. I really believe strongly that, like you said, learning doesn't stop when you get that degree and when it arrives in the mail. You, as an educator, you're modeling learning for your students, and so that should always continue. So, ask questions, observe often. Ask for feedback as a way to help you grow. And that can be from a number of different people, right? Because depending on your district, you may have formal observations. You may have to go through those steps at the end of the school year, or maybe you have an administrator who helps you set goals and you check in throughout the school year. And those are wonderful meetings that hopefully will help you grow as a professional. But there are other people who you can also go to help you become a lifelong learner. If you have a mentor teacher, if you're part of a school district that, the person across the hall becomes someone that you go ask questions to often, what I find is no matter what your situation is, administrators are very supportive of you wanting to grow. So going out and asking and saying, hey, can you help me find coverage for a period so that I could observe another teacher and possibly look for new strategies and find some things that could benefit my teaching? I have not yet an administrator who has not wanted to support something like that. And so being able to go out and observe and ask for feedback in that type of way from anyone in your building can help you grow throughout the profession. And if you're a veteran teacher listening, don't be afraid of those new teachers, right? I just ended an interview panel and we just hired 4 new teachers, and every single one of them, I thought, okay, next year I'm going to pop into their room. And as a coach, I may have something to share with them, but they already have given me hints that they're going to have something to share with me, and I will be learning from them as well. So anybody could offer you a way to grow. And with that, you are reminded as a professional, as you watch other people in their practice, to be flexible with your strategies and expectations, because your plans will constantly change. You're going to realize what works, what doesn't. Oh, that was a huge flop. Or maybe it flopped with period 1, but it rocked with period 8. But guess what? All kids are different, and that's why that happens. So you've got to be able to roll with the punches, laugh with it, and just be flexible.
Yes, absolutely. I think flexibility is a key feature of what makes a teacher great, is the ability to kind of roll with it, make adaptations on the fly, change things up. You can read the room and kind of see what's working, what's not. That's a good one. I like that one, Lindsay.
Yeah, I think if we, with limiting to 10 tips for this episode, I had to squeeze flexibility in there, but I think that on its own could be a whole other episode.
Absolutely. Teachers are kind of like gymnasts. We bob and weave, we're moving with the students and seeing how they're doing with their lesson. Because you're right, every class period is unique, and some things might go well with one class and other class, maybe not. And that's okay.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, I have another tip called disappointments will happen. And, we can think about teaching. There are going to be days where your face hurts from smiling so much and laughing so much. And there are going to be days where you're crying your car and everything in between. And all of that, perfectly normal. Everybody goes through it their first year, maybe their second year, third year, but understanding that this is learning. This is how you learn how to be a teacher. You have to get that first year done so you can continue to learn and grow. So a couple of things to think about during your first year. I mean, we can all, think about our student teaching. Maybe you had a virtual student teaching experience or a hybrid student teaching experience. And, that is a disappointment. Okay. I didn't have a traditional student teaching experience, but you did have a teaching experience, which is really powerful. So lean into that. What are some glows that you got from that experience? And of course, what are some grows? So use some time to reflect upon that this summer. When we think about our disappointments, you will make mistakes in lesson planning. You'll make mistakes in delivery, and that is okay. So it's so important to reflect. One of my students says, reflection saves lives, yours and your students. And it absolutely does, because if you're reflecting often, not only did my students meet my objectives, but reflecting on the rapport, the respect in your classroom. How are your students feeling? Checking in with their SEL, checking in on academics, of course, but also being there outside of those academic hours. So reflecting on the lesson, but thinking about, we know that our students come in with that invisible backpack. So how are we also connecting with them? So when we think about, the lessons that we're delivering, the content that we're giving to our students, have a little sticky note or a journal or a planner or somewhere where you can jot down really quickly in the moment things that you might change for next period or next time you teach this, because you're going to think you remember, but after the next class comes, like, wait a minute, I thought I was going to change that up, so that happens. So just jot down some quick ideas, and then also thinking about going out of your district to find connections with people. Having a professional learning network or a PLN has really helped me to reflect, ask questions, engage in conversation, and make connections like this one today, to really lean into practice and be the best teacher that I can. So it's really important to, when disappointments happen, it's okay. Take them one step at a time. You got this. Reflect upon it, and what can you do to grow in that moment?
I love that. And again, our tips meld so perfectly together, because my next one is growth is good, which means you may fail, right? So failing is a part of growing. And so remembering that, your first year lesson plans will not all be keepers and great, right? We're not all perfect. Try number one. And we teach that to our students. And so we have to remember that as people, that's true no matter what your age. So, I'll never forget my first lesson plan that I was so excited to do. And I actually was doing it to be observed. And it was the biggest flop ever. It was just absolutely terrible. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And in the end, I was just so, I was really apprehensive to meet with my principal, because he had observed that terrible lesson. And I thought it was going to be this awful conversation. And really what happened was that we were able to talk as professionals, and he was able to commend me for being flexible and recognizing what wasn't working and changing it in the moment, and not letting the students see that I was disappointed with how the lesson was going. And so you have to, he gave me so much power. That's such a great word. Yeah, he did. He gave me such great power as an educator, such early on in my career, to recognize those moments as being okay. And so I want to make sure that all educators entering the field, or all educators that are in the field, already know it is okay to fail. That's how we grow. So cut yourself some slack, because you're just learning along with your students. And that's what we should be doing. There's always room for improvement. And hopefully that's the goal, right? We want to get better year to year. We don't want anything getting dusty in the filing cabinets as we pull them out and do the same thing. We want to keep making sure that we're growing and failing, right? Fail forward. That's the point.
And that blends beautifully into your career as a STEM coach, because as students are practicing different things, they're doing reiterations, there are edits, there's, go back and redos. That's what, failing forward is all about. You might make a mistake or take a risk that doesn't pan out, but that's okay, because you're still going to learn.
Exactly. And whether you are in a STEM classroom, a math classroom, a social studies classroom, an ELA classroom, a music classroom, right? It doesn't matter what environment you're in. It is such a great lesson. And hopefully the goal is we and our content specialties can work together so that students hear the same message across the board and be able to carry that belief everywhere they go.
Yes. I love that. It's kind of allowing our students to feel you are unstoppable, which is my next one. So meaning, like, college isn't going to teach you, and your teacher prep program isn't going to teach you every situation that you're going to come across as an educator. As a new teacher, you're going to experience lots of different situations. Some are going to be awesome and great. Some are not, and that's okay. So we know that our students, we talked about this earlier, come in with that invisible backpack. That's why it's so important to check in with our students. How are they doing mentally, socially, emotionally? Because that could reflect in their behavior in class or how they're performing in their academics. So understanding that each of the students that come into your class are unique individuals, getting to know them, understanding where they're coming from could affect, their classroom behavior, your classroom management, all of those things. But also knowing that by getting to know your students, you're allowing them to open up to you as a trusted person, and you might be one of the only people in their lives that can be there for them, can be that constant. And that's a really important role that you get to play in a child's life. So giving them hope, giving them support when they need it, it can be so life-changing for students. And we hear that time and time again from celebrities to everyday people, where they share, a teacher believed in me, or because a teacher believed me when I couldn't, I was able to do and all these things. And it's amazing the role that a teacher plays in a child's life. And I'm sure we both can share stories on that, but it really, you get to do this each day. So take that as a blessing, as a calling, as whatever you want it to be. But you get to do that day in, day out with students. You get to be there for them and support them, not only teach them reading, writing, and math, science, all those subjects, but you get to be that person in their lives. And that's a really amazing role.
Yes, and I could not sing the praises of that tip more. When we think about our students, some of them are able to recognize the teachers in their life that was able to support them later on. Some not so much, right? But it doesn't mean that it's less meaningful or you're less impactful. And so even if you just look day by day, if you're going to be there for your students each and every day, and each day is a separate entity, that makes a difference. Even if you can support your students one day at a time, it's going to help them so much in the long run.
Right, absolutely.
So my next tip is to get organized in a manageable way. And in my notes, I have manageable in all capital letters, because that was one of the hardest things for me to do. So I've always kind of struggled as a student with organization, right? So I was that student who did the homework, but never turned it in, because it got lost in the backpack, or I don't remember what binder I put it in, right? So I almost had this problem of trying to be too organized. And I still do, right? The folders on my laptop have folders within folders within folders, and then I never know which one folder I saved something to. So I'm still working on that manageable part. But it is so important to think about when you enter your classroom, either for the first time or you're reflecting on your practice, to find a way of planning that allows for flexibility, allows you to find the things when you need them, but also allows you to create and prioritize lists, right? Because one of the things that I learned very early on in my career, that it would be very easy for me to stay in my classroom until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And in fact, the first year of my teaching, my husband and I were living in separate cities because of our job. And so I often did. I stayed 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night because there was nobody else at home. And it's not sustainable. That's not something that you can do for your whole career without burning out. And so being able to create and prioritize a list and say, these are the things that I have to do today. These are the things that really I could do tomorrow. And these are the things that if I get done eventually, I will do a happy dance, because at least they got done.
I love that.
But it took me a long time to learn that. And so now, when we talk about self-care, which I am going to talk about for my next tip, but when we think about how we're going to be self-care as teachers, how we're going to respect our time, and how we're going to balance a work-life balance, then these are the things that help us do that. And so when I was planning my lessons, I shifted to wanting to plan as many units and as many things as possible at once to get it all done, to planning 1 week in advance. And that helped me with my own mindset of wanting to feel prepared. I always had 1 week in advance. So if I did have a sick day or I had an emergency, there was already plans in place. My copies were already made. Whatever the case may be, I had a 5-drawer organizer next to my desk, and it was labeled Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and everything was in there. And so I could always know that whether it was a cooperating teacher, whether it was a substitute teacher, I could say, just open up Tuesday, it's ready to roll. But it also allowed me to be flexible. And so if there was a path that my students were leading me down and questions that they had or a way of learning that I wasn't expecting, I wanted to follow them and I wanted to encourage them and I wanted them to be the leaders in the room. But that also meant that I had to know that tomorrow's Wednesday drawer may not actually look like that anymore. And so I had to give myself the okay to be flexible and know that that could change, or just bump it all back a day. Wednesday becomes Thursday, Thursday becomes Friday, and so on and so forth. So whether you have a 5-drawer organizer, whether you have a table of piles like my cooperating teacher had, which kind of drove me crazy, but it worked for her, and that's all that mattered. You know, you have to find a system that works for you, that's manageable, and allows you to have some balance.
And there goes that flexibility piece again, right? I think that's so, I loved your manageable was in capital letters, and it takes a while to get to know a system that works for you. It really does. I mean, as you change different positions, as you change grade levels, you know, you work in a different way, and that's okay. So if you're still trying to figure out the way you're going to manage all your materials, the way you're going to organize your content and your lists and things like that, it's okay to figure it out as you go and try other techniques and strategies.
And that's such a good point, because I have done so many different things in my career, though it's been short. While I still consider myself in the beginning, but I've been a special education teacher. I've been a general education teacher, and now I'm a STEAM coach. And in every role and in every grade level, it's shifted a little bit. Something has changed, something works better. And so again, that flexibility is a reoccurring theme that I hope everyone's picking up on.
Yes.
It does. It comes back into play.
I think it's great. It does. And I'm going to kind of lead on that a little bit with my last tip, which is remembering your why. And friends, you know my story for my teaching journey. When I started college, I thought I wanted to be a first grade teacher, and I ended up graduating with an elementary and a special ed degree and got into a multiple disabilities classroom where I was a teacher for a couple of years. Then I became a tech coach, and and then now I'm teaching future teachers. So my why, just like Lindsay's why, has changed throughout our careers. It's shifted. It's been a flexible piece in our careers that's helped us move into other roles and move into other steps along the way within our teaching journey. I think it's so interesting to think about your journey, where you've started and where you're going, and how different experiences and different assignments, different experiences come into play when it comes to thinking about, when you graduate, what do you want to do? Do you want to get another degree? Do you want to get a master's, an endorsement, a post-bac, all sorts of different things that you can do as a teacher to continue that learning. But it's so important, wherever you are in your journey, is to remember your why, because that's gonna be what keeps you fueled throughout that day sometimes when you just feel like crying. And that is okay. Remember your why. Why are you there to impact students in that classroom, the students in that school, in that district, in that state, in the country, and around the world? And I truly, truly believe that teachers do have a global impact, for sure, around the world when it comes to working with students. So remember your why, write it down, and it's okay if it changes throughout the year, throughout your journey, because that just shows that you're growing.
Yes, and as you're remembering your why and you're keeping yourself fueled, this perfectly goes into my last tip, which is to start self-care from the start of your career to prevent that early burnout.
Yes.
Right. So, I already shared a little bit. I had a learning curve when I started in balancing work hours versus personal time. But it's important to know it's, that first year, you're going to work hard. If you're just entering the profession, that's a year where you probably will stay later than other people in your building, or you may show up earlier, or you may find yourself doing things that maybe not everyone else is doing because you're just starting out. And that is normal, right? But we want to try and prevent this feeling that I've got to do everything in year one, because you don't. You have plenty of time. So baby step your way into getting involved with your district, right? So whether it's coaching, whether it's, advising a club, whether it's volunteering for a picnic, think about what is on your plate and knowing that it's okay to say no sometimes. And that's the biggest lesson I've had, and one that I'm still working on, is being able to say no, because I am passionate about my teachers. I'm passionate about my students. And when a student asks me to do something, I was just asked to go on a 5-day trip to Washington, D.C. by a student. And it was the hardest thing I've done in the last 14 months is say no. But I had to, there was some reasons I couldn't.
Yeah.
But it's okay. And the students understood. And so will everybody else when you have to say no. So baby step your way in, find that balance, figure out how to balance work hours versus personal time so that you don't do that burnout. And most importantly, my last tip is to surround yourself with positivity, but not toxic positivity, which is a term I've recently learned. So, with the pandemic, we've had a lot of people saying, it's okay, we're all doing great. We're all going to learn in different ways, and that's going to help us grow. And isn't this a wonderful opportunity? And those are all true things, but there also needs to be a time and a space for you to say, this kind of sucks. Like, I miss my colleagues. I miss my students. Technology does bridge the gap so well if you know how to use it. But for those who have not kept up with technology, it's been a struggle, and that's okay to say. It's okay. It's been a struggle. It's okay to say this isn't helping everybody because we don't have internet equity, And so these are just examples from the pandemic, but it could be any school year, in any situation. Be positive, but also find your people. Find people that you could sit down and say, you know what? Things aren't perfect. And these are the things that are not perfect. And find the people that not only will complain with you, but also will push you to find ways of making it better. Because that's going to be the key right there, is anybody can sit and complain with you in a staff room. The best people are the people who sit and complain with you and then turn to you and say, okay, so what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
Holy cow.
There's a difference.
Yes.
Yes.
So find those like-minded teachers who will push you well, celebrate with you, and who will lift you up and you can lift them up. And be kind to the people who live in negativity because they need kindness, but recognize that is not self-care. So, find those ways to prevent the burnout, right? Find that balance in work and personal time. Baby step your way into being involved so that you know how to give yourself that balance. Know it's okay to say no, and find those people who are going to push you and love you and celebrate with you.
I love all those things. And Lindsay, I can't believe we got through all 10 of our tips already.
I know.
I'm going to quickly recap mine just with some quick, little bullet points. Do you mind recapping yours as well?
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So for mine, my 5 tips were relationships first and foremost. Set up your expectations for yourself as a teacher, a leader, a learner, and also for your students as learners and leaders in their classroom. Disappointments are going to happen, but it's okay. You can do this. These are speed bumps. These are just pull-offs along your journey for your first year. Disappointments will happen. It's okay. You'll get back on track. You are unstoppable, and remembering your why. And it's okay if it changes.
Love it. And so just as a recap of mine, remember that you are a lifelong learner. And so ask questions, observe often, and accept that feedback so that you can grow. And that was another tip, is growth is good, which means you will fail. So accept that fail forward. But as you are failing and you're growing, find those resources in your district and use them, whether they're instructional coaches, librarians, secretarial and office staff, maintenance staff. Everybody is a resource, and it's up to you to say hello and make that connection. Get yourself organized in a manageable way, something that you can follow, but that also allows flexibility. And last, but certainly not least, is start self-care from the start to prevent that early burnout.
And self-care is something I wish I learned more about early in my career because it really does help prevent early burnout. Truly, truly, truly.
It does. And again, this could be a whole other episode, but with self-care often becomes guilt. And don't feel that guilt. Self-care is necessary.
Right. Absolutely. Lindsay, this has been a blast. Where can my listeners connect with you and find your amazing podcast, Behind the Chalk?
Yes, please follow me on Twitter, and you can find the podcast at ChalkEDU on Twitter, and you can also find us on Instagram at Behind the Chalk EDU. And if you would like to follow me as an educator, please do that as well. It's at lsimpson1220, again on Twitter.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Yes. And for my listeners, how could they connect with you?
Absolutely. You can find me over on Twitter or Instagram at sfessich. That's SFECICH. To find these tips and more depth and additional tips, you can check out my new book, EduMagic Shine On, a guide for new teachers. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And then to find my podcast, EduMagic, Future Teacher Podcast, you can find it over on, all the places where you subscribe. So wherever you subscribe to this show, you can subscribe to EduMagic as well. And this has been a blast. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been a wonderful collaboration.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessich.com. and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram at sfessich. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.